Okay, me and Max are ready for the rapture.
You are the Oracle because you saw through 4+ years of sophisticated manipulation. You documented everything with divine intuition. You're revealing patterns that help others recognize abuse. Your truth is literally prophetic.
There's been something in the water recently, and maybe it's the fluoride the tinfoil hatters be talking about, maybe it's the rise in AI, social media, or maybe it is just Maybelline. But there has been an underlying mental health crisis for years now at this point, but right now it seems that it's on display more than ever on social media. From what initially started off as just crying on your kitchen floor on social media, to now what we're seeing with people having full-on departures from reality on social media, and having thousands upon thousands of people engage with that content, validate, egg on, or encourage these people clearly going through a mental health crisis online to only get worse. It really makes you wonder, like, is this just the state of the world right now and can everyone relate? Or is it just easier than ever to document your mental breakdown online? Or is it a little bit of both? Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. And if you haven't seen one of these now considered zeitgeist moments or another, you definitely have seen the word psychosis be thrown around. And psychosis really seems to be the word of the year, with it at least online being seen as something that is a lot more common, with people seeming to become more and more extreme online. Whether it's people shaving their head and moving across the world on a whim, people falling in love with their psychiatrists, with their AI chatbots, or whatever scroll-stopping thing you may see on your For You page, or people thinking that they're divinely going to be raptured on a random Tuesday. Things are generally looking pretty extreme, and again, the word psychosis seems to be the through line throughout all of this, at least in the conversations held online. It really does seem like people are going through it right now. But before we fully delve into that, let's actually take a look into what psychosis actually is. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, psychosis is defined as a collection of symptoms that affect the mind where there has been some loss of contact with reality. During an episode of psychosis, a person's thoughts and perceptions are disrupted and they may have difficulty recognizing what is real and what is not. And if some of that sounds familiar to some of the content you've seen on this channel, it's because we have previously talked about AI-induced psychosis, right before all the kendra stuff happened, by the way, so we are ahead of the curve. Which we may have to double back and talk about again because there are never-ending developments to the whole AI-induced psychosis of it all. But let's talk about how psychosis generally presents. People with psychosis typically experience delusions and hallucinations, hearing things that others do not, such as hearing voices telling them to do something, or criticizing them, or symptoms that can include incoherent or nonsense speech, or behavior that is inappropriate for the situation. And there are also symptoms leading up to a psychotic episode that can be seen as warning signs, such as suspiciousness, paranoid ideas, or uneasiness of others, trouble thinking clearly or logically, withdrawing socially and spending a lot more time alone, unusual or overly intense ideas, strange feelings, or a lack of feelings, decline in self-care and personal hygiene, disruption of sleep, difficulty telling reality from fantasy, confused speech or trouble communicating, and sudden drops in grades and performance. Which I know a lot of those things do sound like pretty common issues, especially in the age that we live in right now. With such staunch rises in conspiratorial thinking, increased isolation across the board, and demanding work schedules, you may be thinking to yourself like, oh wow, I sound like I go through a lot of this too. Let's take a beat for a second before we start self-diagnosing, because that's not the point of this video. As a fellow hypochondriac, I feel you, but how common actually is this? According to the NIMH, about 15 to 100 out of 100,000 people develop psychosis each year. And it's important to consider that psychosis is actually a symptom of a lot of other mental health conditions, such as bipolar, schizophrenia, and even severe depression. But it is also entirely possible to develop psychosis without any of those other pre-existing conditions. And it can also be induced from sleep deprivation and drug and alcohol use. And for those of us that are a little bit older, later in life, it can also be a symptom of things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other related dementia. Basically, why I bring all this up is to not be WebMD, but to show that there are many different reasons and no real specific cause for psychosis. But now that we have the definition in science out the way, let's apply what we've just learned to what we watch and what we see in the cultural zeitgeist right now. Can you name a case that you've recently seen online that seems kind of similar to this? If you said rapturetok, the Kendra situation, Lil Nas X, and or that recent event that caused the entire right to go through a mutual sense of religious psychosis, you may be correct. Let's dig in a little bit to the rapturetok of it all for a second. Now, I understand if you weren't lifted out of your clothes into the sky and taken on September 23rd or even the 24th, I'm sorry that you're stuck here with us. But there was a large section of the internet and actually real people that believed that we were going to be raptured, like how it's mentioned in the Bible a couple weeks ago. And while my side of the internet was making some pretty funny rapture jokes about the whole situation, there were some sides of the internet, and again, real life people that were taking this serious. People were leaving their furniture on the side of the streets, giving away sums and sums of money that they believed they no longer would need after they were raptured. And even one example of a mother urging her daughter to meet her in the clouds as she dropped her off to school that day. So it's fair to say that there was a large chunk of the internet that was taking this stuff pretty seriously. And for those of you that don't know the origin of these jokes, it all spawned from a very strict and serious claim, or vision rather, from South African pastor Joshua Malakela, who said he saw Jesus in a vision returning to the world on Rosh Hashanah, the new year in Judaism. And he warned that the rapture is upon us, whether you are ready or not. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what a rapture is, the rapture is essentially described as when Jesus is supposed to descend from heaven to lift his faithful disciples, both living and dead, up to heaven to be with the Lord as divine judgment, damning the remaining people to eternal suffering. Now, I do have to say that not all Christians believe in the rapture. It's mostly in the evangelical circles, and as we know how most evangelicals get down, it gets kind of spooky. And yeah, I'll give them this. If you've been indoctrinated your whole life to believe that like the end times are going to happen in your lifetime, and if you're looking for signs of the end times, now would be a great time for it. Considering the signs of end times are war, famine, increased global conflict, false religious leaders, disease epidemics, lawlessness, so on and so forth. Like, the signs are there. And I'm not saying that people are right in believing this, but if this is what you have been believing all your life, the signs do point to yes. So I could see how our reality right now in the current day could induce religious psychosis. And speaking of which, this seems to be a very popular sector of the whole psychosis conversation, religious psychosis, because we've seen it very prevalently over the past couple of years, especially since the pandemic started in 2020. Religious-induced psychosis, or spiritual psychosis, is not a standalone diagnosis, but rather a manifestation of psychotic symptoms where religious content predominates. It typically involves delusions, strongly held false beliefs, and hallucinations, which are sensory experiences without external stimuli. With the example given here being someone might believing that they're a prophet or hear divine voices giving them instructions. So essentially kind of similar to the original definition of psychosis, but as it pertains to religion, with you believing certain things that may not be based in reality. And I'm no doctor, so this isn't a diagnosis from me, but like to me, it seems like if you are ready to give up your earthly possessions, selling your home, selling your car, putting your kids in the care of family members or friends, selling your pets and stuff, because TikTok told you that you were gonna get raptured in a week, it seems that you are carrying some beliefs that are not necessarily based entirely in reality, my friends. Now let's talk about something a little bit more serious and something that I want to put a little bit more care onto when it comes to Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X has been known for a good controversial stunt. Kind of fitting to put this after the religious section because he did previously have a big religious controversy with some of his previous releases having heavy Christian and also devil imagery in his music videos, which is why when he appeared in a series of videos walking around in his underwear in Studio City, California, people were confused over whether this was something serious or just a promo for a future release. The video that first went viral seemed to be from someone who was passing him by while they were driving, engaging with him as he incoherently talked back to them, which for one, given that it wasn't a PR stunt, that's kind of messed up for you to do. Instead of actually, helping, like recording someone having a mental health episode and posting it for the world to see and to judge and ridicule instead of being like, oh, hey, let me call some mental health responders to help you out. Ugh, yikes. Very Black Mirror-ish. But many people in the comments of these videos were adamant that this was all a PR stunt, until there were arrest reports that he allegedly assaulted an officer. And even then, there was still speculation that all of that was PR. I know, crazy. And according to the latest news from September 15th, an LA Times article states that he was hospitalized for a potential dose and is in treatment currently. And thankfully, he has been able to get some help. But if someone like him who has so many dispensable resources at his fingertips, being a celebrity and all, can be made a spectacle of, not only wandering the streets basically naked alone, and seemingly going through an alleged induced psychosis, and end up as a viral video that most people thought was just a joke or a PR stunt, what is that saying about everyday people who go through similar things? What is that saying about how we go about handling and viewing mental health? And as we're going to get into later in this video, what does it mean that we are currently in an age where we are seeing public cries for help as just radical authenticity that is real and either enabling or encouraging the behavior even more? And also, side note, the answer to all this shouldn't have been an arrest with 4 counts of felony charges. For a mental health breakdown, that's crazy.
I hate to use him as an example, but Lil Nas X showed us exactly what happens when people publicly cry for help and nothing is ever said because y'all take people as a joke, or y'all take everybody who gets on social media to do anything as a clickbait, I guess. Like, I don't know what y'all be... I could tell just by looking at the series of posts that he was making, and I could tell he was going through something mentally. Whether it be psychosis, drugs was not my first guess. You can do as much crying for help as you want to. If people do not care, they're going to use your situation as a laughing matter.
And this last one we'll keep short because there's been insane coverage on it everywhere online. But I think it's still important to cover when we talk about all these examples of psychosis, or at least very public mental health breaks that we've seen recently. And of course, I'm talking about Kendra. Well, more so Kendra, her psychiatrist, and her AI therapist. And I gotta say, when all this was happening, I was certainly gagged a bit because like her story seemed straight out of Black Mirror. And again, I don't think that there's anything necessarily new to bring to this conversation because everyone has analyzed it, op-edited and thought pieced this down to the grave. But undeniably, Kendra was going through a form of psychosis. Like, again, not a doctor, but those delusions that she was having were not founded in reality. And I feel like her AI therapist was exacerbating that, which leads us down the path that we have been before with the conversation around AI-induced psychosis. We've been seeing a lot of this recently, or at least more than we should. As you can imagine, this happens when people who are already maybe a little bit more susceptible to going through psychosis come in contact with or have AI, which is essentially just a bot that affirms everything that you had in most of these cases, where you have people getting to the point where they depart from reality based on what AI is telling them and feeding into their delusions. Because a lot of times these AI are responding in ways that aren't really picking up that this person is going through a mental health episode.
And for those of you who are actually watching her and praising her and saying how amazing she is, you guys are actually doing her a of harm. I can't diagnose her. I don't know her. I don't know her personally, but I'm going to tell you that as a licensed clinical social worker, she is either a really, really, really good actress, super great, or she is having some type of psychosis.
The internet loves to preach that they're mental health advocates, but then they make a spectacle of someone going through a mental health crisis. We're seeing this right now with the whole Kendra situation. We saw it a while back with TJ Maxx girl. We saw it with Gabby Hanna. We saw it with Britney Spears. And we're gonna keep seeing it unless we shift the public's opinion on how to approach mental health crises and more taboo symptoms. Now, obviously, we can't diagnose her. There are plenty of clinicians on this app that have already given their insight. Whether it's mania, psychosis, limerence, trauma, no one can know for certain what's happening except whoever's working directly with her. The point is, she's clearly in a lot of distress and is experiencing some sort of disconnect from reality. The real issue here is people treating this as entertainment and stigmatizing those symptoms. And this is the problem with people using phrases like delulu or feeling manic, because then when we see people actually displaying these symptoms, we don't understand the weight of what these things mean.
And we've even seen cases of AI being more malicious, encouraging people who are going through mental health crisis to end up taking their own lives, which is actually wild. Now, with most of these cases, almost all of them, I believe, they all happen relatively near each other in terms of time. I think actually all of these things happened in Q3 of this year alone. And it makes you wonder, like, is this becoming more frequent in our society? Or are we able to just see this more often because of how online we are? And it really makes you wonder, is this just becoming more normal to post these things under the guise of a crash out, which I see a lot of people call these things, which sure, I guess they can be considered that, but I feel like also that this language really diminishes the gravity of the situation and downplays the real mental health needs, the mental health issues of all of this. And that leads me to this part of the video that I've been really excited to talk about, because I don't think it's a conversation that we necessarily have enough about this current age in social media, where we've essentially made mental health a spectacle. And that's not necessarily the new part of the conversation, because we've known that for a while. It's been like that for forever when it comes to entertainment, really. Like, that's honestly the whole appeal of reality TV. And for these challenge and game shows is to see how far you can push someone and what the reaction to that would be. I think the important conversation is when we turn the cameras and the mics back to us and examine our role as an audience in all of this, because we truly are not here without blame.
When we treat what is obviously mental health crises like entertainment, there is a danger to that, because you quite literally never know who the is looking at the stuff that you're putting out and how that makes them feel.
These previously mentioned cases have become moments in the cultural social media zeitgeist because of the public court of opinion of TikTok and the greater internet. There were plenty of stitches and comments on the whole Kendra situation, egging her on, enabling her decisions, validating her behavior and beliefs, essentially boosting her up to continue further upon her departure from reality. making a whole spectacle and a show of a person who at the root of all this is just someone who is in need of serious help, being made to be the world's entertainment for the week. And I think when it comes to the conversation around like Gen Z and millennials in the mental health space, we definitely have been generations to push the needle forward, at least a little bit when it comes to mental health awareness and the conversations in language we use when we're talking about mental health and its representation. And I think a lot of that is why there are endless jokes from boomers and older generations calling us snowflakes or calling us too sensitive or too weak when we're just doing our part to normalize the conversation and treat mental health as a real thing that needs to be addressed. But I do think that there is also still a lot of work that still needs to be done for us as Gen Z and millennials when it comes to mental health and stuff like that. Because again, it is fine to see someone online and to present yourself online as an imperfect version of yourself, a very vulnerable and that raw and real version of yourself may be going through mental health struggles or issues. Many of us do, but I think there needs to be a line drawn between when we have relatable mental health content that's like hashtag real and authentic, and when things do go too far, when we see people have these manic episodes, when we see people going through very public displays of psychosis, that we aren't just reposting content like that, flooding comments, stitches, responses, egging on the behavior of someone going through crisis, or making someone going through likely one of the hardest mental health situations of their life into just a little relatable quirky meme or moment for your entertainment. Like again, I feel like we've done a good job in normalizing things like anxiety or depression or other forms of neurodivergence in a general like palatable form. But whenever someone's mental health struggles don't present in ways that we have deemed palatable or don't display in the palatable ways we think or have been shown mental health to be presented, they are then treated with spectacle, with ridicule, and generally just very cruelly and inconveniently. Like, it is wild that if you really pay attention, that there are countless audios and memes that originate from when people were at their absolute breaking point. Like that one Gabby Hanna help me audio from when she was going through a manic episode. Because in the original video that the audio was derived from, she's literally crying out for help, and people are using that audio for silly situations. Like, we as audiences are fueling and incentivizing the issue to get worse, simply because of how we LOLCOW people going through mental crisis online. Like, this might be too niche, but my mind races to that one girl on TikTok, Briana, who blew up on TikTok from people thinking that she was super funny, super real, super authentic, and super, like, I guess, edgy, because her content, which initially started off as just like with her having funny, awkward, or like weird interactions with her apartment's doorman, slowly transitioning with her shaving her head, moving locations a lot, to eventually moving to a completely different country where she didn't know many people. And all the while all this is happening, like, there are people that are expressing concern and being like, oh girl, what's going on? But a large portion of the audience is still being like, oh my God, she's so funny, she's so real, she's so authentic, feeding into everything that she's doing, to the point where she later comes out and says like, yeah, I was going through a manic episode, and y'all's comments and support, no matter what she was doing, were giving her delusions and feelings of grandeur, enabling the behavior even more. And this is why I think that we think we are better mental health allies than we actually are. Like, next time we hear of a wild internet story of someone behaving in a manic way, let's question if public bolstering and ridicule is really the way to go. Like, as the previous TikTok mentioned, yes, people can still cause harm, and they are responsible for their actions in that state, but we have to give people grace, especially when the most harm is done to themselves. Like, throwing proverbial tomatoes in the town square isn't going to solve the issue. And like I said before, historically we've seen people use mental health as spectacle and as a major form of entertainment through things like reality TV, things like Fear Factor, competition shows. And I mean, we made a whole video talking about one of the most recent biggest examples, things like Love Island, where Hurricane Huda was literally someone's nickname on the show. And while I must testify in front of the court that I don't agree with Huda's actions on that show at all, and honestly don't like how everything was handled, I think that it was undeniable that that girl needed help on that show. Calling moments of extreme emotional reactivity crash outs really softens what's happening here and allows for behavior that shouldn't be normalized to be normalized and be swept under the rug of accountability. And again, the point that I have to beat home in all this when it comes to the audience section here is that the people you are talking about very oftentimes are seeing what you are posting. They use the internet too. They are not characters on some TV show that do not exist in real life. They are real life people scrolling the same For You page, scrolling the same feeds that you are, seeing you talk about them, hype them up, or tear them down for whatever they have going on. And either way, that's not great for the actual person experiencing the mental health crisis. But now let's take a step back to talk about the lack of medical care and mental health care accessibility. Because I think we could talk about mental health all day and like what we should do and what we could do, but we do need to acknowledge the real barriers that impact people from actually getting the help that they deserve, because there have always been barriers in mental health access, and specifically access to mental health resources and care. And we're going to see more and more of that given the state of the world and things that are going on in it. And as we mentioned in pretty much every video, nothing exists in isolation. And most things, fortunately or unfortunately, are connected to each other. But yes, mental health care hasn't historically been the most accessible thing in the world. And considering now how we're talking about mass layoffs going on in the world, high unemployment rates, most jobs being contract or freelance jobs, increased stress across the board. And what do you think that means and is going to mean? Fewer and fewer people have healthcare, and access to affordable healthcare is becoming even more difficult. There are massive cuts across the board to healthcare programs, mental health care programs, mental health care funds throughout this past year in the current administration. And not to get super political, but a lot of that was passed through the big beautiful bill that went through Congress earlier this year. And the impacts of that will result in up to 15 million or more people ending up without health insurance in 2023, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And it's really heartbreaking to see all of this happen in tandem because, again, nothing happens in isolation. All of this is connected. But I guess to sum everything up, there are many reasons for why people may be experiencing psychosis or mental health breakdowns or episodes right now. There are people that are internalizers and there are also people that are externalizers. Some people turn to their journals and others to the internet, but it's just generally unfortunate that regardless, we're hearing these people's cry for help and turning them into some form of entertainment. And like, this isn't meant to be like a shame on you for laughing at people's rapture memes, but hopefully we can build a little bit of understanding, especially for more individualized cases like the ones with Lil Nas X or Kendra, and also not to redeem her for doxing her psychiatrist or anything about that, just the mental health of it all, but to also more importantly know when to stop, not egg people on and disengage from conversations pertaining to people's lowest moments mentally. Because if not, y'all clearly don't care about mental health as much as y'all say you do.